Hi all, welcome back to Text to Action series where we transform natural language into an actionable outcomes using AI. In part 1, we have explored and set up the basic API foundation that is required for us to connect to the Google account calendar API securely and create an event. Today, we're going to use AI to enable us to simply type natural languages or send an API call like schedule a team meeting tomorrow at 3 p.m. and have our system intelligently transform such words into adding an actual calendar event action. Let's see how we can create the calendar event using the UI that we designed. This is a simple UI that is put together, but let's make sure that there are no calendar events right now in my calendar for March 2025. Let's jump back. This is a very simple UI that is created to test whether it's working as expected or not. So let's say I create an event that says create a dentist appointment on March 15th from 10 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. 11:30 a.m. If I make a request from here, if I try to create an event, as you can see, the request to our backend passes the text and the dentist appointment is being created successfully as expected based on the response we received. And if we go back and see that it created on March 15 like we would expect. Now let's see how we can do the same via API call. I have I have already constructed the curl command. So as you can see here, I am sending schedule a team lunch meeting with Sarah tomorrow at 3 p.m. for 2 hours. Cool. It got successfully created as expected. Now let's go back to verify. Perfect. So it did create it tomorrow, March 9th from 3 to 5 p.m. Now let's see how this whole end-to-end flow actually worked. User enters natural language text through UI or API call. System sends that specific text to Ollama LLM that is running locally or either hosted with a carefully designed prompt. Using this specific prompt, we are making the Ollama to intelligently extract the required data in a structured format, specifically JSON structured format that our REST API endpoint expects to create the calendar event. Now the system passes that structured data JSON to the Google Calendar API and the Google Calendar event is being created as expected. And then the user receives confirmation details. Now let's see how this is possible by digging deeper into the code. Ensure your Ollama is up and running. You can verify that by sending this simple curl command to hit this specific endpoint in which Ollama typically runs locally. Now let's proceed to the actual code changes that made this possible. Everything starts here in the app.js where we first expose the endpoint that receives text from either UI or through an API call. Once we receive that call, it would extract the text that's passed in the request body, and then we would first try to construct the time zone that the user is currently available, and then we would call this function text to calendar event to extract the required JSON payload that we are most interested to send to create the calendar event. This is the actual place where all the core actions happen to achieve it. Let's jump straight into it. In here, you could see the Ollama endpoint and the model is being configured. Right now, I'm using 3.2 model, and we are making an Axios call with this build prompt to hit the Ollama endpoint with these specific informations. Let's go over these real quick. So this all these are to have a standardized way of like constructing the timings and dates and also accommodate the time zone. Now you have a prompt, which is where the actual instructions happen, where we are instructing how exactly the the LLM to process the text it receives. First, we would set the persona. We are saying you are an expert calendar event extraction system designed to accurately convert natural language text into structured JSON. And once we set the persona, we are going to mention the the ask, like what exactly you are expected to do, and then we're going to introduce constraints like today's date is the date that we constructed above, and then we can say we can input different constraints. For example, we could say for dates without a year, assume current or next occurrence. For relative dates like tomorrow or next Friday, calculate the actual calendar date. These would help it to understand and accommodate different edge cases. And finally, we are explicitly mentioning that your response must be a valid JSON object only, no other object or explanation or formatting needed, and there is no need for you to provide markdown code blocks. Just send the raw JSON object, because this, by default, LLMs would respond in markdown format and along with some explanations as well. This is this is super helpful for us because we would end up receiving raw JSON object, and there is no need for us to do any filtering or parsing. And we also mentioned few examples for it to actually understand how to process those. For example, this says schedule a team meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. for 45 minutes. The output is a structured JSON that we would want from the LLM to send it back to us. It created the summary, it extracted the team meeting from this specific text and added it to the summary. It added the same to the description, and then it created the start time, start date time, and then end date time. And this is the required JSON payload that would be required to hit the Google Calendar API and create an event. And then we have certain util functions which helps us to form a time zone and parse the response. Switching back to app.js, once we receive the event data in this specific format, we would destructure and add it over here, and then we would send it to the create calendar event, which is a util function which handles creating a calendar event using Google Calendar API. And this is why we need to provide the request payload in this specific format, and that's why we have explicitly instructed the LLM to provide in this specific format. And once this is done, it will be able to create the calendar event as expected. And this is the whole end-to-end flow, and you could read more in this specific tech blog, and all the code that we discussed today is available here, so please feel free to check it out. This concludes part 2 of converting words to calendar events using AI. And I would like you to step back for a moment and understand what we just built right now. This is a simple example to prove and showcase how powerful applications that we can build out of this. For example, imagine you are using Nest thermostat and you have access to Nest API endpoints. This specific endpoint is used to change the thermostat mode to heat, cool, or heat cool. Now imagine for a second that you could say in the living room increase the temperature to 72 degree Fahrenheit. Now, what has happened here is your actual raw text is being sent to the LLM, and the LLM would convert that to a structured request payload, which you could actually send to this specific endpoint in this format, and it would achieve your expectations of increasing the heat to 72 degree Fahrenheit. There should be a combination to set the 72 degrees, but it would this in this API it would set the heat. Now you could do the same thing in different applications as well. Let's take one more example to prove this. Imagine you want to place an order of, I don't know, a protein powder or a bike for your kid, and that specific text can also be converted into this expected JSON payload, and we can hit this Amazon API endpoint to make that happen. The same goes for different sectors, Expedia.com to book your flights, and uh, tax services everywhere. Options are endless. It's really a very powerful concept that we can apply in our real life to make further impact. This concludes our video. I hope you find this useful, and I'll see you in the next video. Yeah, take care. See ya.